Back in 2010, I was seconded to work with another aged care organisation to do a project which was mainly around palliative care for dementia clients, but it also involved doing advanced care planning. So I blindly went in not knowing anything about advanced care planning at the time, and within a couple of weeks of reading the materials around it and what was happening in the States and the beginning processes in Australia, I realised just how important it was going to be, specifically to aged care. So I got really involved with it and got excited, and at the time the project I was doing had a component in it that was another version of advanced care planning that was being introduced in Victoria. And as we were reading it, there was some difficulties anyway, because there's different regulations in Queensland about what's called here advanced health directives. So there were some nuances we had to investigate anyway. And then we put it to the ethics committee of our organisation, and a big stop happened. And we thought, what's going on? Why is this a problem? Why can't we go forward with it? By this stage, I just thought it was incredibly important and we needed it in aged care, regardless of dementia or any other chronic illness. So we had quite a lot of discussions at the time with the ethics committee and the bioethicist at the time about, are you saying we can't do advanced care planning in a Catholic facility? And he very clearly said, no, I'm not saying that. It's how you present it that it's important. So I started investigating what that meant. I remember having a conversation with someone saying, we have little old ladies with their nighties up around their heads having their chest pumped by an ambo because nobody asked her what she wanted. I don't want that to happen. And we were very clearly told we don't want that to happen either, but how can we do this? So we looked into all of the documents we had at the time from Catholic Health Australia and put them all together and pulled out salient points and quotes from those and put them into a draft presentation and said, look, we can do this with a Catholic ethos, just using some form of structure that is important, like standardised training and support for people and if documents, if people want to use them. Not everybody wants to use a document, some people do. And that was approved. So we started teaching it from the Catholic Health Australia perspective in our organisation. We really needed to step back and say, let's look at a good quality policy and a good quality procedure which will protect and guide our registered nurses through the process. We had lots of conversations with lots of people early on throughout both projects, and the more we thought about education for our people, the more we realised that it wasn't a matter of just saying, this is advanced care planning, do it. We wanted to make sure they had a sound structure and that there was different levels of information for different levels of engagement in the process. Obviously, a registered nurse who's going to sit down with someone and talk about their future wishes needs to understand the legals behind it, they need to understand the terminology, they need to have some rapport and empathy with the person that they're communicating with. But if that resident sort of invokes their advanced care plan and says, I don't want to go back to hospital for the 15th time, I want to just be peaceful in my own home, there's other workers that are going to hear that statement and be engaged with that person whilst they're perhaps in their final stage or just when they're extremely sick. They need to understand what's going on as well, because they might try to force them into a different decision, or they might think the organisation's letting this person down, or the family's trying to kill them, and find it difficult to understand what's going on. So we wanted to put together a package that supported everybody. So an introduction to advanced care planning in reasonable everyday language for whether it be a care worker or a cleaner or someone in the kitchen, understanding what advanced care planning was about, right up to what we called an advanced care planning facilitator. So that person who's going to actually sit with someone and engage in the conversation and establish the information this person wants to get across. So our training program has multiple tiers. We start with simple presentations to all staff, which defines what advanced care planning is, has a simple suggestion about how it might manifest, the conversations that it might stem from, how it might be articulated, whether it be a simple conversation or if someone likes to complete an actual form, and then certain scenarios where the advanced care planning might be invoked so that everyday staff can understand that process that people might go through. The next tier is for either health professionals, particularly registered nurses, or pastoral carers, to actually go through and learn not only the basics of advanced care planning, but some of the logistics of how you go about performing advanced care planning or participating in advanced care planning. So it starts, we've chosen RNs and pastoral carers because they're the people that understand the deep ethical concerns that are part of advanced care planning. And from experience in previous projects as well, there's some staff members who simply don't have that level of knowledge about either the clinical issues they face or the spiritual issues they face to cope with that level of conversation, and then be able to take it through to family members and help interpret for those family members what that means, what this person's choice means. So we have a program where the online learning covers the definition of advanced care planning. It has segments on exactly what documents in Queensland look like and the difference between informal advanced care planning and formal advanced care planning. Obviously the formal meaning the legal documents, whereas informal is about that conversation and any form of recording of it that we receive. It covers the Catholic Health Australia ethos and the meaning behind the differences between a Catholic-based advanced care planning process compared to other more commercialised versions. And then we bring people in for a face-to-face session. And during that face-to-face, we develop more a little about what capacity means, because capacity in aged care is very important. If we have somebody who obviously is in advanced dementia and can hardly speak, it's unlikely they have capacity to say, yes, I want care, or no, I don't want care. So therefore, a process needs to be gone through to discuss with the family who's either the enduring power of attorney, which is a Queensland term, or who might just be a substitute decision maker. So that often is quite complex for RNs who may never have had that conversation before to work through, so we need a lot of conversation about that. We also put scenarios to people about what they might experience on that face-to-face time. It's a 6-hour day. For people who say, yes, I want to be involved in advanced care planning, and for people who don't, and they get to practice it. And as they practice, they bring up pieces of information about what they've already experienced. They might even bring up personal experiences, which is as valuable because it's so critical to understanding, what it's like for normal people to go through. You're going to be helping other normal people go through it, so you need some empathy. So we discuss a lot of private issues as well. And the types of difficulties they might have bringing it up, the questions they have about, well, is this something that fits with the standards, the aged care standards, which of course it's now written into the standards, which for me, I think that's really important because aged care is so entwined in the aged care standards and working towards meeting those standards all the time. If you have something that focuses on advanced care planning there that we have to measure, we're much more likely to progress it and not feel like we're doing something that's not actually within the general structure of aged care. So we talk about that as well. It's part of standards. It's a common requirement now in Australia to do this. It's a huge movement across the Western world. But one of the other things that the face-to-face training allows us to do is to talk about the different cultural meanings of advanced care planning. And this is something you can put it up on a PowerPoint and they can read it online and go, oh yeah, culturally it's really important. But what does that really mean? And we have facilities that have staff from every continent in the world come together, and at times they're really quite fearful. And we bring it up as one of the modules within the face-to-face session and say, hey guys, does anybody here have a problem talking about death? And there's an assumption as a registered nurse, everybody talks about death. But that's not the case. We have registered nurses who say, no, in my culture, if you bring up death, you bring death into the family's environment. So you must never bring it up. So we have to talk through those issues. We get people to bring in their own ideas and say, well, you know, how do we deal with that? Is that okay? And it's quite interesting the number of people who say, I don't know, is that okay? Yes, it's okay for an RN to have her own culture or his own culture. But we deal with it by saying, okay, some people can be advanced care planning facilitators. Some people can use their professional knowledge to refer this person to an advanced care planning facilitator. And that's your role. If you can't facilitate the conversations, you can recognise the importance of that person's statement. That opportunity is now that this person's saying, you know, I don't think I can live any longer, this is too hard. I can't deal with it, however, I know somebody who can. Let's have that conversation. I'll bring them in to have a talk with you. So we deal with all those sorts of very grey area issues that are really hard to put into anything as cold as an online thing. We may in the future be able to do much more with our online structured materials where you can get more personal interviews in it, but there's really no better value than sitting beside your peers and saying, I don't know how this is going to work, what's your idea? And using those ideas to actually inform people's practice, because everybody has their own styles, and that's what takes a little while for people to learn. How do I put this in my own words, rather than saying, how would you like to present this? You know, it doesn't work that way. You need to be able to have a conversation in your own style and say, perhaps if you weren't able to speak for yourself, what would you want other people to say? Who would you want to speak for you? That might be the way you put it. It might be far more casual or far more formal. But people have to try it on, see how it fits, and practice with it. So it's been a slow process, and it's as slow to get the documentation into place as it is to get the people to practice it. Because in aged care, you have people that support admissions, you have people that support the financial side of things, you have people that do the care processes, and they have different involvement in the person's admission. So who owns the documents and who owns the opening conversation has been something we've had to also discuss with people. So do you, when the minute this person says, okay, I'll come into your facility, does an administrative person say, do you have an advanced health directive or advanced care plan? You know, is that going to be the right person to do that? Often the answer is no, it's not. However, someone has to ask the question, do you have the document? So even that's been something we've needed to play with and work on. So we have now a standard place to put the advanced care plan. We have better understanding that asking the question for an advanced health directive is important. It is now being integrated into our IT systems, and our RNs who have gone through the training are starting to ask the questions and engage people in conversation. You know, so the doctor's very isolated making those sort of decisions. Advanced care planning helps them as much as the family and the staff to be able to say, right, this is where they want to go, this is what they want done. Because you ask any health professional, do you want to do what the person wants for themselves, or do you want to do this out of a textbook because someone told you to? They'll always go for what the resident or the patient wants. It's really important to make sure that you have that broad educational structure, the support structure, but also the infrastructure in terms of policy and procedure, to make sure that it's not half-baked, that it's supportive and protective of the staff who are going to participate in it, but also so that there's an understanding of the depth and breadth that advanced care planning can lead to the quality of care you provide. If you really think more about it, the conversations you have aren't just about if you're going to die or after you die. They're about fundamentally, what do you value? What do you see as most important to you? What are those non-negotiables? What are those critical things to you that make a difference? So if you have an advanced care planning conversation, you actually end up having an assessment of this person's values and interests, which can be fundamental to their entire care process. So it becomes a fundamental part of their care. And I think sometimes in aged care we miss that holistic view. We talk about holism, but we do a lot of tick box things, and we separate roles like pastoral care and nursing and the entertainment type stuff that we often do in diversional therapy. And yet the person's fundamental values about what's important to them are valuable for all of those roles. And advanced care planning can bring it together. It needs to be a whole of organisation, structured, supported, understood and encouraged process. Otherwise it just ends up far less than what it really means.